Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our tactical breakdown series, looking at the players that have been linked to Arsenal in a statistical and analytical way with the help of some expert insight. I'm very happy to be joining you this afternoon to talk about a interesting player that I knew before today very, very little about. Thankfully, through the world of stats, through the world of Y Scouts, and looking at some fantastic clips, I can tell you that I know plenty more than I did 12 hours ago when I broke you the news in the morning show, of course. But we'll talk a little bit more about Edon Zhegrova in a second. If you haven't already dropped a like on the video, please make sure that you do. It really does help out the channel. We do these breakdowns for all of Arsenal's major transfer targets that are linked throughout the season. We've not had to do too many of these because Arsenal's targets have been pretty specific and nowhere near as wide-reaching as former transfer windows, which I kind of appreciate. But we will, of course, be determined to still cover and analyse all of Arsenal's targets throughout the window. And if you are finding this channel for the first time, every day we do a show at 8 a.m. UK time, keeping you up to date with everything that happens in the world of Arsenal. So it is definitely worth you hitting that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything in the world of the Gunners. We kick off, though, our show, as always, when it is a tactical breakdown series on Edon Zhegrova with some expert insight. We like to get someone on who genuinely knows who the player is. Otherwise, you're just sitting here and listening to me waffle about a player I've only learned about for the last 12 hours. So I'm very happy to have the expertise, as always. I'm very happy to bring him back to the show when it is regarding a player playing in the French league, and that's Mr. Jeremy Smith, expert in all things French football, an all-round nice guy. Let's hear what Jeremy has to say about Edon Zhegrova.
So the latest Lille player who's been linked with Arsenal, it seems that Lille have kind of replaced Lyon as the kind of go-to source for Arsenal rumours, is Edon Zhegrova, who only signed for Lille in January, kind of as a replacement for Ikone, who went to Fiorentina. It's a bit of an out there rumour for me. I think from look at Zhegrova's stats and how he played for Lille, he's definitely an exciting player. He's young, he's only 23. He's your kind of classic wiry winger who looks like he'd be sort of blown over by a big gust of wind, but is sort of exciting, skillful, an inverted winger, plays on the right, but he's left-footed. So, that kind of sort of Robin-like, I guess, player who cuts in and has a decent long shot on him is always quite exciting. But it just seems very early to kind of draw any serious conclusions and to be able to say with any certainty that he'll succeed in the Premier League. He was certainly a big fan's favourite at Lille, although a lot of that was sort of more expectation than what people saw. I think earlier in the season when Lille were playing really dour football, the fans were just desperate for him to come on to just sort of wake people up and give a little bit of excitement. And what he did on the pitch, he only played for about 400 or so minutes, and he's got 3 goal involvements, goals and assists at Basel as well. His stats on paper look very good, but to be fair, that's the Swiss league, and it's a bit of a step up to the French league, and you can't yet say that he's done enough there to really draw any conclusions. And then obviously it's another step up to the Premier League. So I think it's probably if you can get him for, I guess, around 10 million, maybe it's worth a punt. There's definitely a lot of potential there, and I think he's a really good player to have in your squad. And as a plan B, he's got a really good engine on him. Although, as I said, I think for the Premier League, he'd probably have to bulk up a bit. I'm not sure that there's much sort of defensive nous there. I'd be tempted to kind of compare him to Alain Saint-Maximin, which to some people would be a compliment. To me, it's not necessarily, because I think he's a bit of a luxury player, but also a big liability. I think Zhegrova has got some learning to do and some experience to build, but clearly there's a lot of raw talent there. So, Arteta and Arsenal, if their new sort of project is to kind of, bring players in very young and develop them from there, then I think there's definitely some good talent there to work with. But again, he's not the type of player that if you're expecting him to immediately come in and sort of lift you to Champions League places, I don't think that's what you're going to get from him. But certainly I think he'd be an exciting player to have in the squad and to see how he develops.
A massive thank you to Jeremy for joining us this afternoon to give that expert view on Edon Zhegrova. You can follow him on Twitter at JeremySmith98. And if we are indeed linked with any French or French league-based players, you can be sure that Jeremy will be having his hand in letting us know more about who exactly they are. So listening to what he's got to say there, it's, I'm not going to sit here and disagree because I don't know too much about the player. I've only looked into him as of today and done a fair amount of research, but I agree in that he is kind of this technical dribbler, very good on the ball, and the stats that we're going to look at in a second certainly do show that off. I think, and there was a question in the chat box just a second ago from Mike who says, is he shortly, a good player? Let me find the question. Where is it here? Mike Bell says, Tom, bottom line, is he a good player? Yes, I think he is a good player. And let's go into the reasons as to why. Firstly, looking at his player rankings and what sort of kind of areas of his game stand out. His non-penalty goal rating per 90 is good at 83, but I'm surprised that it is that high considering he only has the 2 goals for Lille this season. And these are stats taken from, 491 minutes of Liga football. So not a massive sample size. But what he does do well, he takes plenty of shots. He's got a decent shot creating actions percentile there. In terms of his dribbling, that's where he really stands out, and you're about to see more of that in a second. But also, if you see the tackles being in the 96th percentile, that is certainly an area of his game that he also excels in. Now, if you were to ask me what I think Mikel Arteta's dream, ideal kind of winger is, for me, it's definitely a player that has energy, commitment, technical skill, good on the ball, creative, can score goals, and that makes me sound like I'm, reaching across plenty of different attributes, but you need all of these to play in Mikel Arteta's teams. But key is going to be tracking back, pressing, and obviously being dangerous in the final third. So let's have a look at the player comparison. We're going to make some comparisons with Asensio because, of course, we've been linked to Asensio and he does play on the same side. Rafinha as well, for obvious reasons, because he was the primary target in that area, and our existing right winger in Bukayo Saka. So looking at the heat maps, you can see all four play on the right-hand side. But he has one of the smallest heat maps, as along with Asensio, because both players haven't played particularly a lot. These are taken from their league statistics, specifically in Zhegrova's case, Liga. No Basel statistics, no stat bumping coming in here from playing for Basel in the Swiss league. This is all specifically from minutes playing in Europe's elite. So looking into that. In terms of goals, he scored twice and outperformed his XG by quite a considerable amount, but nowhere near as high in terms of goals as the others. What I would say is what stands out here is Marco Asensio's goal output. 12 goals from 7.92 XG. Impressive indeed. Goals per 90, though, to get a better idea of how his goals spread across the minutes he's played, 0.34 is higher than that of both Rafinha and Saka, but I don't think there's enough minutes played to make a genuine conclusion that he would score more than the latter two. Asensio, again, coming out quite well with 0.47 goals per 90. If we look at his shots and where he takes them and how accurate he is, you can see that he tends to cut in from the right-hand side and take them just from the right-hand side of the box. Couple of goals from outside the box, really key. You've probably seen a couple of compilations by this time. One of those goals in particular, a lovely curling, low-driven effort into the bottom left-hand corner. 35.7% of his shots hitting the target is a good return, but as you can see from the graphic, there's only a collection of strikes. You look at someone like Saka, Rafinha, and Asensio, there was a much bigger, better idea of what those players give. But you can still see a trend in the small sample that we have got for Zhegrova. In terms of assists and creativity, despite him having a good shot creation action percentile, according to FBref, still has only got the 1 assist so far this year, and his low 0.68 XA isn't the best per 90. I would like to see that significantly higher, but he didn't play all that many games. So can I really blame him for that? Probably not. Dribbles per 90 is where he starts to shine. 10.72 attempted dribbles per 90 with a 60.3% success rate on those dribbles. Significantly higher than Asensio, more than triple the Spaniard, and nearly more than double that of both Saka and Rafinha. And not only that, but he has the joint highest success rate. When this guy gets on the ball, he is difficult to stop. Tricky, technical, low center of gravity, gets past players really, really well. And you know what the big thing that with Nicolas Pepe when he left Lille and joined Arsenal was that whilst he could maybe beat one player, it was the string of defenders that he needed to beat. And Zhegrova has shown on multiple occasions that he can do that. That's one of the biggest kind of strings to his bow, if you will. In terms of getting inside the box, though, as you saw from his shot creation graphic, he takes those shots from outside. He doesn't necessarily like to do as much in the box as the likes of Saka, Rafinha, and Asensio. Only 2.38 touches in the box per 90. Likes to do more of his work on the outside, and perhaps that's why his crossing statistics are as high as they are. 4.08 crosses per 90. Really, really solid. 25% of those hitting the target. Not as accurate as that of Saka or Rafinha, but certainly more so than Asensio, and certainly more frequent with his crossing as well. So really interesting to see that there. In terms of passes into the box, again, as I said, he likes to work outside the box, and that shows again in passes into the box. 5.1 passes into the box per 90 with a 60% accuracy. Really, really strong. And when you also consider the fact that this is someone that plays on the right and is predominantly left-footed, like Saka, like Rafinha, it's interesting that we don't necessarily see a player that's afraid to cross with their right foot, afraid to cross with their left foot, or get into positions where they can pass into the box with either foot. That's a really encouraging sign and statistic for a player that is considered an inverted winger. Going into the kind of defensive side of his game, again, he stands out even more. 7.66 recoveries, with 60% of those happening in the opposition half. That's more than double that of Saka, more than double that of Rafinha, and more than double that of Asensio. And 60% is only very slightly beaten by Saka in terms of winning the ball higher up the pitch. There's a lot of potential in this kid, and I'm liking it. Lastly, we look at pressures. He matches that in a similar kind of ballpark to Saka and Rafinha, 16.2 pressures per 90, but 36% of his pressures do mean a turnover of possession within 5 seconds of that pressure. Really strong stats. But, to conclude, this is a very small sample size taken from his games in Liga, taken from, around 600 minutes of football. It's not a lot that we have to go on. But what we have got to go on is quite impressive. And I'm very intrigued to see if this player does intend to move to Arsenal, and Arsenal do intend to make him a serious offer, if he has an impact at the club. What I find odd about this one is, if we are looking in the market to spend on a bit of a risky winger, the question is why, when you've just brought in Marquinhos? Perhaps Marquinhos, who can play more comfortably on both flanks. He's got no preference necessarily. Maybe that's one of the reasons why. I just feel like with a wide forward, if we're going to invest in someone, is it not better to invest in someone like a Cody Gakpo? Is it not better to invest in someone like a Rafinha type player? And by the way, I know I said this morning on the show that I'd choose Zhegrova over Gakpo. That was a classic mistake of me reading a comment and talking at the same time and messing up. So Gakpo, I would still 100% choose over Zhegrova at this stage, just because I think it makes the most sense. But if he was to, say, be signed by Arsenal, I wouldn't be losing my mind. I wouldn't be frustrated. And I also think it's certainly kind of an indication that Arsenal's priorities lie in midfield and in defence. And I think that's fair. The wide forward position for me was always a luxury position. I was listening to Dan Potts and Lee Judge's talk last night, and Lee pointed out that he was surprised that Arsenal were going as big as they were for Rafinha when we've got greater needs elsewhere, and I think that's a completely fair conclusion to draw. To finish the show, of course, we're going to take some of your questions and comments from the chat box, so if you indeed do have any comments about this, I would love to answer them for you. Matt G says, how much would he cost? Good question. Despite the reports that did come out, we are still yet to get kind of confirmation around the figure that he'd be going for. CIES Observatory value him at around 7 to 10 million euros. He moved for 7 million euros. He's not necessarily been able to level up that value, but the problem is because he was signed just in January by Lille, he has a very, very long-term contract, so they can pretty much demand what they want in a matter of sense. I think that if Zhegrova was interested up by the Arsenal move, he would certainly push for it. I think Arsenal would probably have to pay something in the region of £15 million. That would be my kind of guess of a ballpark of what we might have to pay, which isn't particularly that much, especially considering Bernd Leno looks like he's leaving for around a figure quite similar to that, just lower than that. So perhaps that even pays for it. I hope that answers your question, Matt. Let's scroll up and see if we can answer some of the others. We Love Football says, one thing about Zhegrova is that he spent quite a few years developing Kosovo, and the level of coaching there is much lower than other areas of Western Europe. I don't know that for sure. That's, of course, We Love Football's opinion. But I think he's obviously played at Basel and now Lille, where he's got plenty of quality coaching, especially in France. The level of coaching is excellent. So if he's showing these kind of numbers and he's only recently bursting onto the scene in the European kind of major leagues, I'm still very impressed by his numbers. When it comes down to other questions from you guys, let's scroll up and see if we can find some specifics. Because I know that often the temptation is to just throw questions in about all the other topics that we could get. But I do like to keep these specifically kind of about what we've got. King says, Tom, how does he compare to Nelson? And does this mean Nelson is leaving? I think if we were to sign Zhegrova, it would certainly point towards Reiss Nelson leaving. In terms of a comparison, they're different in terms of Nelson being a right-footed right winger, but he's also more versatile because he can play on the left. Zhegrova is an inverted right winger, so there's a difference there. But they're both quite direct in terms of the way they want to play. I think Nelson's more keen on getting inside the box than what Zhegrova is. Zhegrova likes to do more of his work outside the box, so there's a slight difference between the two there. Let's go to Greg, who says, well, it's all relative. As far as games played is concerned, you all know, Arteta loves his defensive quality, and it looks like his dribbling is far superior to Pepe's. And if you're beating Pepe in a number of areas like defensive output and even dribbling, which is, if we're honest, Pepe's best quality is his dribbling, along with perhaps his shooting. If you're beating him in that regards and you can get someone for 50 million quid around that kind of ballpark, I do lead towards it. Let's go to Iron Cub, who says, if what Arteta wants is a more natural backup to Saka than Pepe, then I think Zhegrova suits that better than Gakpo. Interesting indeed. Iron Cub says he went to Belgium at the age of 15, so he's got plenty of years with quality coaching. Well pointed out there, Iron Cub, as well. Olu Kayode, so apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. That's the best I can do. Says, hi, Tom. Olu here. I know I should have just gone with Olu. That would have been much better. Any concerns about his goal ratio? As I said, I don't think there's enough evidence right now to suggest that that's a concern because he's only played 13 appearances in Liga so far, got a couple of goals, and he was coming off the bench quite a lot. You know, he's only got 500 odds minutes of Liga football at this moment in time. So no, I don't think so. I think if we were to sign someone like him, he'd be coming in as a potential option that would get more minutes in the Europa League and in the cup games and give us some more depth. But let's see what happens. Thanks, Olu. I appreciate the support as always. Let's go to Quincy, who says, hello, Tom, from Africa, Malawi. Thank you for joining me, mate. What does this say about the likes of Amari Hutchinson, Marcelo Flores, and Salah Ouladamhand, who are close to breaking into the first team? Well, first of all, they are three different players. I mean, Salah, for instance, plays more in a number 8 kind of role. Amari Hutchinson plays more on the right wing, and Marcelo Flores is more of an attacking midfielder. So they are three different players, but I think this mostly affects Amari Hutchinson more than anyone. And he is expected to move out on loan. There is an expectation that there's been interest and inquiries from plenty of teams. Hopefully we can see something move for him in the near future. We're going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video if you are new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. I will see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. bright and early, as always, to keep you updated with all the latest Arsenal news. Share the video around. If you see anyone using it, let me know, because I've seen that happen over the last 24 hours or so. But yeah, it's been a genuine pleasure to speak to you, as it always is. And as always, up the Arsenal.